Imagine holding the phone with trembling hands, knowing the next 5 seconds could end your life. Sarah, a simple maid in the city's most feared household, had one rule: never disturb the boss. But when she saw what his new fiancé was doing to his 7-year-old daughter, the rule book burned. She dialed the number everyone feared. "Come home now," she whispered, terrified. "She's going to destroy her." What happened when Lorenzo Moretti walked through those doors wasn't just a rescue, it was a revelation that would shatter the underworld. You think you know Mafia stories. You aren't ready for the truth behind the Moretti walls. The rain didn't just fall on the Moretti estate, it assaulted it. Sheets of grey water hammered against the reinforced glass of the sprawling mansion in the Hamptons, isolating the household from the rest of the world. Inside, the air was always 10 degrees colder than it should have been. That was the Lorenzo Moretti effect. Even when the Don wasn't home, his presence lingered in the black marble floors, the sharp architectural angles, and the suffocating silence that governed the staff. Sarah Jenkins adjusted her apron, her knuckles white as she gripped the handle of the feather duster. She was 24, with eyes the color of old pennies and a habit of making herself invisible. In this house, invisibility was survival. She had been working for Lorenzo for 6 months, hired not for her credentials, but because she had passed the background check that mattered. She had no family to leverage, no debts to exploit, and she knew how to keep her mouth shut. But tonight, silence felt like a sin. "Please, Beatrice, no," a small voice whimpered from the drawing room. Sarah froze in the hallway. That was Mia. 7 years old, with curls like spun gold and a heart too fragile for the world her father ruled. Since her mother passed away 3 years ago in a car accident that everyone knew was a hit, Mia had barely spoken. "Stand up straight," a sharp, venomous voice commanded. Beatrice Sterling. Beatrice was Lorenzo's new fiancée, a match arranged to solidify a truce with the Sterling syndicate out of Chicago. She was stunning, tall blonde, with eyes like cut sapphires, and a soul made of absolute zero. To Lorenzo, she was a business partner and a stepmother for Mia. To the staff, she was a tyrant. To Mia, she was a nightmare. Sarah crept closer to the slightly ajar mahogany doors. Through the crack, she saw the scene that made her blood run cold. Mia was standing in the center of the room, clutching a tattered stuffed rabbit, the last gift her mother had given her. Beatrice towered over the child, a glass of red wine in one hand and a lit cigarette in the other. "That thing is filthy," Beatrice sneered, flicking ash onto the pristine Persian rug. "Lorenzo spoils you. He lets you keep trash in a house meant for royalty." "Do you know what we do with trash, Mia?" Mia shook her head, tears welling in her large, dark eyes. "It's not trash. It's Mummy's." "Mummy is dead," Beatrice said, her voice devoid of empathy, sharp as a scalpel. "And soon you'll learn that crying won't bring her back. It only makes you look weak. And I don't tolerate weakness." Beatrice snatched the rabbit from Mia's grip. "No," Mia screamed, a sound of pure, unadulterated panic. "Quiet!" Beatrice hissed. She walked toward the fireplace where a low fire crackled. "This is for your own good. You need to grow up. If you can't let go, I'll help you." Sarah didn't think. She didn't calculate the odds. She didn't remember that she was a maid who was paid minimum wage to dust statues and scrub floors. She just moved. She burst through the doors. "Stop!" Beatrice turned, her expression shifting from cruelty to shock and then to amusement. She dangled the rabbit over the flames. "Well, well, the help speaks." "Put it down, Miss Sterling," Sarah said, her voice trembling but her feet planted firmly. She moved between Beatrice and the fire, shielding Mia with her body. "It's just a toy, please." "It's a crutch," Beatrice corrected, taking a sip of her wine. "And who gave you permission to enter this room, Sarah, was it? Or is it Samantha? You're so forgettable, I can hardly keep track." "It doesn't matter who I am," Sarah said, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. "Just give the rabbit back to Mia. Mr. Moretti wouldn't want—" "Mr. Moretti," Beatrice interrupted, stepping closer, her perfume something expensive and cloying filling Sarah's nose, "is in Italy. He is closing a deal that is worth more than your entire bloodline. He doesn't care about a stuffed animal, and he certainly doesn't care about the opinions of a maid." Beatrice's eyes narrowed. "Now get out of my way, or you'll be on the street before the rain stops." "I can't do that," Sarah whispered. She looked back at Mia, who was trembling, hugging herself. Beatrice smiled. It was a terrifying, dead smile. "Have it your way." She didn't throw the rabbit into the fire. Instead, she poured the rest of her red wine over the toy in her hand, watching the crimson liquid soak into the worn grey fur. Then, with a casual flick of her wrist, she tossed the sodden-stained mess onto the floor at Mia's feet. "Oops," Beatrice deadpanned. "Clumsy me." Mia let out a strangled sob and dropped to her knees, trying to wipe the wine off the toy, her tears mixing with the red stains. "Clean that up," Beatrice snapped at Sarah, "and then get the girl out of my sight. She's ruining my evening." Beatrice turned and walked toward the window, pulling out her phone to make a call, dismissing them entirely. Sarah knelt beside Mia. "It's okay, sweetie. We can wash it. It'll come out." But Sarah knew wine on old fabric was permanent. She saw the devastation in Mia's eyes. It wasn't just a toy. It was a safety anchor, and Beatrice had just tainted it. Sarah guided the weeping child out of the room and up the grand staircase to her nursery. She sat with Mia for an hour, rocking her, until the exhaustion of grief took over, and the child fell into a fitful sleep. Sarah walked to the window of the nursery. The storm was raging harder now. She looked at her reflection in the glass, pale, tired, but something new was burning behind her eyes. Rage. She reached into her apron pocket and pulled out her cell phone. It was a cheap prepaid model. She scrolled to a contact she had saved, but was strictly forbidden to use unless the house was burning down. The boss. Lorenzo Moretti was a man who commanded armies. He was feared from Sicily to New York. Disturbing him on a business trip could mean termination or worse. Sarah looked at Mia's sleeping form, her small face puffy from crying. Beatrice was just getting started. If Sarah did nothing, Mia's spirit would be broken long before Lorenzo returned in 2 weeks. She'll destroy her. Sarah pressed the call button. 1 ring. 2 rings. "Speak," a deep baritone voice answered. No greeting, just a command. The sound of it sent a shiver down Sarah's spine. In the background, she heard the low hum of an engine and muffled Italian conversation. "Mr. Moretti," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Who is this?" The voice dropped an octave, dangerous and sharp. It's Sarah, the maid, at the estate." Silence, the kind of silence that precedes an explosion. "Why are you calling me on this line? Sarah, is the house on fire?" "No, sir." "Is Mia hurt? Is she bleeding?" Not physically, sir, but—" Sarah took a deep breath, gripping the phone so tight the plastic creaked. "You need to come home. Now." "Excuse me." He sounded incredulous. "It's Ms. Sterling, sir. Beatrice. She's tearing Mia apart. I can't stop her. I tried, but she doesn't care. If you wait 2 weeks, there won't be anything left of Mia to come home to. She'll destroy her." There was a long pause. Sarah could hear the wind, howling outside her window, matching the static on the line. "Sarah," Lorenzo said, his voice terrifyingly calm. "Do you know what you are asking me to do? I am in the middle of a negotiation with the Camorra." "I know, sir. I'm sorry. I value my job. I value my life. But I value your daughter more. Please." The line went dead. Sarah stared at the phone, her hands shaking. Had he hung up in anger? Was he sending someone to kill her for her insolence? Or had he listened? She didn't have time to wonder. The door to the nursery burst open. Beatrice stood there, flanked by two of the house security guards, men loyal to whoever held the checkbook at the moment. "I saw you on the phone," Beatrice said, her eyes gleaming with malice. "Who were you calling the police?" "Your boyfriend." Sarah slipped the phone into her pocket. "My mother. She's sick." "Liar!" Beatrice spat. "You have no mother. I read your file." She gestured to the guards. "Take her downstairs, lock her in the cellar until morning, then throw her out the gate." "You can't do that," Sarah cried as the guards grabbed her arms. "Mr. Moretti isn't here." Beatrice screamed, her mask of composure slipping. "I run this house. Take her away." Sarah struggled, but the men were too strong. They dragged her out of the nursery, leaving Mia alone in the dark. As they hauled her down the hallway, Sarah prayed, "Please, Enzo. Please come home." The cellar was damp, smelling of earth and old wine. Sarah huddled in the corner, wrapping her thin cardigan around herself. It had been 3 hours. The cold was seeping into her bones. Above her, the house was silent. She wondered if Mia had woken up. She wondered if Beatrice was celebrating her victory. Beatrice Sterling was not just a cruel stepmother. She was a predator. Sarah had sensed it from the day she arrived. Beatrice didn't look at Lorenzo with love. She looked at him with hunger. Hunger for his power, his connections. And Mia was an obstacle, a piece of baggage from a past life that Beatrice wanted to erase. Suddenly, a thunderous noise echoed from above. It wasn't thunder. It was the sound of the heavy front doors being thrown open with such force that the reverberation shook the floorboards above Sarah's head. Then shouting. Voices raised in panic. The heavy footsteps of many men. Sarah stood up, pressing her ear to the heavy wooden door of the cellar. "Where is she?" The voice was a roar. It wasn't the calm, terrifying baritone on the phone. It was the sound of a wounded lion. Lorenzo. He was here. Sarah's heart leaped. He had come. He had actually come. "Lorenzo, darling," Beatrice's voice, high-pitched and nervous. "You're back early. We didn't expect—" "I asked you a question." The sound of glass shattering followed. A vase. A table. "Where is my daughter?" "She's sleeping. She's in her room, safe and sound. Why are you acting like this? You're scaring me." "And where is the maid?" Lorenzo demanded. "Sarah." "The maid." Beatrice laughed, a brittle, nervous sound. "Oh, that girl, I had to let her go. She was stealing Lorenzo. Caught her red-handed with the silver. I sent her away hours ago." Sarah pounded on the cellar door. "I'm here, Mr. Moretti, I'm down here." But the door was thick oak, and the chaos upstairs was too loud. "Stealing." Lorenzo's voice dropped to a lethal quiet. "Strange. Because I received a phone call from her 3 hours ago. She didn't sound like a thief. She sounded like the only person in this God-forsaken house with a backbone. Lorenzo, you can't trust the help over me. I am your fiancé. I am a Sterling." "You are a guest in my home," Lorenzo snarled. "And guests do not lock my staff in cages. Open this door." "Which door?" "The cellar." "Now." There was a scuffle, then the sound of keys jingling. A moment later, the lock clicked, and the cellar door was flung open. Light flooded in, blinding Sarah. Standing at the top of the stairs, silhouetted against the chandelier of the hallway, was Lorenzo Moretti. He was a giant of a man, 6'4", wearing a black trench coat soaked with rain. His dark hair was plastered to his forehead, and his jaw was set in a line of granite. Behind him stood 4 of his personal guardsmen, who looked like they ate concrete for breakfast. Lorenzo looked down into the darkness. When his eyes landed on Sarah, the tension in his shoulders seemed to drop a fraction of an inch. "Sarah," he said, "come up here." Sarah's legs were shaky, but she climbed the stairs. When she reached the top, Lorenzo reached out a hand. For a second she thought he was going to strike her. Instead, he placed a large, warm hand on her shoulder to steady her. "Did she hurt you?" he asked, ignoring Beatrice, who was standing by the wall, pale as a ghost. "I'm fine, sir," Sarah said. "Just check on Mia, please." Lorenzo turned his gaze to Beatrice. It was a look of pure disgust. Without a word, he turned and marched up the stairs, taking them 2 at a time. Sarah followed, and the guards blocked Beatrice from moving. Lorenzo kicked open the nursery door. Mia was sitting up in bed, clutching the wine-soaked rabbit, her eyes wide with terror. When she saw her father, she didn't smile. She flinched. That flinch broke Lorenzo. Sarah saw it the way his face crumpled for a millisecond before hardening again. "Papa," Maya whispered. Lorenzo walked over and knelt by the bed. He didn't care that his coat was wet or that his shoes were muddying the carpet. "I'm here to sorrow treasure. I'm here." He saw the rabbit. He saw the red stains. He smelled the wine. He looked at Sarah, who was standing in the doorway. "She did this." Sarah nodded. She said it was trash. She poured wine on it when Mia tried to save it. Lorenzo gently took the rabbit from Mia. "It's not trash," he said softly to his daughter. "It's precious, because Mommy gave it to you." He handed it back. "Sarah will clean it, and if she can't, we will find someone who can." "Okay." Mia nodded, burying her face in his wet coat. Lorenzo stood up. He kissed the top of Mia's head. "Sarah, stay with her. Lock the door. Do not open it for anyone but me." "Where are you going?" Sarah asked, fearing the violence she saw in his eyes. "To take out the trash," Lorenzo said. He walked out of the room and the temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Sarah locked the door as instructed, her heart racing. Downstairs, the confrontation began. Lorenzo descended the stairs, slowly, deliberately. Beatrice was waiting in the foyer, trying to regain her composure. She had poured herself a drink. "Lorenzo, really?" She started flashing a seductive smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Over a toy. You're being dramatic. The child needs discipline. You're never here, so someone has to do it." "Discipline." Lorenzo stopped at the bottom of the stairs. "You think cruelty is discipline?" "I am preparing her for the world," Beatrice snapped. "Our world. She can't be a crybaby forever." "She is 7, Lorenzo said. He walked over to her. Beatrice flinched but held her ground. "You are not her mother," Lorenzo said, his voice low, "and you never will be. The engagement is off." Beatrice's glass shattered on the floor. "You can't be serious. My father will—" "Your father," Lorenzo interrupted, "will do exactly what I tell him to do if he wants to keep his shipping routes in New Jersey. Do you think I need the Sterlings? I tolerated the Sterlings." "You need us!" Beatrice screamed. "The O'Connors are moving in on the docks. Without my family, you're vulnerable." Lorenzo stepped into her personal space. He towered over her. "I am Lorenzo Moretti. I am the storm. I don't need an umbrella." He gestured to his guards. "Get her out of my house. If she resists, drag her. If she comes back, well, you know the drill." "You'll regret this," Beatrice shrieked as 2 guards grabbed her by the arms. "You'll regret this, Lorenzo. You chose a maid over me, A peasant. Lorenzo didn't even look at her as she was dragged out into the rain, her screams swallowed by the storm. He just looked at Sarah, who was watching from the top of the banister, defying his order to stay in the room. Their eyes met. For the first time, Sarah didn't look down. Lorenzo exhaled a long, weary breath. He unbuttoned his wet coat and tossed it to a nearby servant. He looked at Sarah. "Thank you," he said. The words were heavy, sincere. "I just did what was right," Sarah replied. "In this world," Lorenzo said, walking toward the stairs, "doing what is right usually gets you killed. You are brave, Sarah. Braver than my soldiers." He stopped 2 steps below her. He was close enough that she could smell the rain, the expensive cologne, and the metallic tang of a gun holster under his suit. "You said she would destroy her," Lorenzo said. "You saved my daughter tonight. Ask for anything. Anything you want, it's yours." Sarah looked at him. She didn't want money. She didn't want power. "I just want to keep my job," she said softly. "And I want Mia to be safe." Lorenzo studied her face, as if trying to solve a puzzle. "Your job is secure. As for safety, as long as I am breathing, you both are safe." But as Lorenzo walked past her to go to his daughter, Sarah felt a chill. Beatrice's threat hung in the air. The O'Connors are moving in, and Beatrice Sterling was not the type of woman to forgive a humiliation. The war had just begun, and Sarah was no longer invisible. She was right in the middle of the crossfire. The morning sun over the Hamptons usually brought relief, but inside the Moretti estate, it brought a stark surgical clarity to the wreckage of the previous night. Sarah had barely slept. She had spent the night in a rocking chair by Mia's bed, waking up every time the child whimpered. When dawn broke, painting the nursery walls in pale shades of peach and grey, Sarah finally stood up. Her back ached, and her uniform, which she hadn't changed out of, felt stiff and grimy. She expected to be fired. Despite Lorenzo's words the night before, men like him often regretted showing vulnerability. He had exposed his heart to a maid. Usually, loose ends like that were cut. At 7 a.m., the nursery door creaked open. It wasn't Lorenzo. It was Arthur Penhaligon, Lorenzo's consigliere. Arthur was a man in his 60s, impeccably dressed in a 3-piece tweed suit that made him look more like a university professor than the man who balanced the books for a criminal empire. "Miss Jenkins," Arthur said, his voice dry and devoid of judgment. "Mr. Moretti requires your presence in the study. Immediately." Sarah's stomach dropped. Is he angry?" Arthur adjusted his glasses. "Mr. Moretti is a complex man. It is best not to keep him waiting. I will sit with the child." Sarah nodded, smoothed her apron, and walked down the long, silent corridor. The house was already bustling with activity, but it was different today. The usual staff cooks, cleaners were moving with heads down, whispering. Beatrice's departure had sent a shockwave through the ecosystem of the house. She reached the double oak doors of the study. She knocked once. "Enter." Sarah pushed the door open. The study was a cavern of dark wood leather and the smell of old paper and gun oil. Lorenzo was sitting behind a massive desk that looked like it had been carved from the hull of a warship. He was on the phone speaking rapid-fire Italian, his hand massaging his temple. He looked up as she entered, pointing to a leather chair opposite him. He finished his call and hung up the receiver, clicking loudly in the silence. "Sit," he commanded. Sarah sat perching on the edge of the chair. "Mr. Moretti, about last night. I know I overstepped." "You didn't overstep." Lorenzo cut her off. He picked up a file from his desk. "Her file." "You stepped up. There is a difference." He opened the folder. "Sarah Jenkins, 24, foster care system since age 6, no college degree, previous employment at a diner in Jersey, and a hotel in Manhattan. Fired from the hotel for—" He squinted at the paper. "Insubordination involving a guest." Sarah blushed. The guest was hurting a housekeeper. I intervened. "I see a pattern," Lorenzo said, closing the file. He leaned back, studying her with intense slate-grey eyes. "You have a habit of protecting the weak against the strong. In my line of work, that is usually a fatal flaw. But for my daughter, it is a necessity." He slid a piece of paper across the desk. It was a contract. "I am terminating your employment as a maid," he said. Sarah felt the tears prick her eyes before she could stop them. "Sir, please. I have nowhere to go. I just— Read the paper, Sarah." She looked down. The header didn't say termination notice. It said governess and private guardian. She scanned the numbers. The salary was triple what she was making. "I don't need someone to dust my vases," Lorenzo said, standing up and walking to the window. "I can hire 100 people for that. I need someone who will stand between my daughter and the wolves. Last night you proved you are the only person in this house with the courage to do that. You are no longer a maid. Your sole responsibility is Mia. You answer only to me. Not to the housekeeper, not to my guards, and certainly not to any future guests." Sarah stared at him. "You trust me, you don't even know me." Lorenzo turned to face her. The morning light caught the sharp angle of his jaw. "I know that you faced down a sterling to save a teddy bear. That tells me everything I need to know about your character. But be warned, Sarah. This position comes with risks." "What kind of risks?" "Beatrice Sterling is not just a spoiled socialite. Her father, Conrad Sterling, controls the shipping lanes in Chicago. By kicking her out, I have declared war. They will come for me. And because you are the one who exposed her, they may come for you." Lorenzo placed his hands on the desk, leaning in. "If you sign that you are under my protection, but you are also a target. Can you handle that?" Sarah thought of Mia, the little girl who had forgotten how to smile. She thought of the way Mia had clung to her father's coat. Sarah picked up the pen. "Where do I sign?" Lorenzo's lips curved into the faintest shadow of a smile. "Bottom line." As the ink dried, the phone on Lorenzo's desk rang again. He picked it up. His face hardened instantly. "Conrad," Lorenzo said, his voice dropping to that lethal temperature again. "I was expecting your call." Sarah stood up to leave, but Lorenzo held up a hand, signaling her to stay. He wanted her to hear this. "She is not welcome in my house," Lorenzo said into the phone. "She abused my daughter. I don't care about the Chicago deal. Threaten me all you want, Conrad. But know this, if you send your men to New York, make sure they prepare for their funerals." He slammed the phone down. The plastic casing cracked. "The Sterlings are pulling out of the alliance," Lorenzo said calmly, as if discussing the weather. "And they are reaching out to the O'Connors." "The O'Connors?" Sarah asked. The name was whispered in the staff quarters like a curse. The Irish mob, brutal, chaotic, and hungry for Moretti territory. "Declan O'Connor has been waiting for a crack in my armor," Lorenzo said. "Beatrice just gave him a canyon." He looked at Sarah. "Go to Mia. Pack her bags. We are moving her to the safe house in the city for a few days until I secure the perimeter here. You are going with her." "And you?" Sarah asked, surprising herself with the concern in her voice. "I have a gala to attend tomorrow night," Lorenzo said, adjusting his cufflinks. "The Police Benevolent Association charity ball. If I don't show up, people will think I'm afraid, and a Moretti never shows fear." "You're going alone." "I am." "That sounds dangerous," Sarah said. "It is," Lorenzo replied, "but that is the life. Now go. You have work to do." The safe house was a penthouse overlooking Central Park, but it felt more like a fortress. The windows were bulletproof, the elevator required a retina scan, and there were armed men in the lobby, the hallway and the kitchen. Sarah spent the next day trying to normalize life for Mia. They watched cartoons, baked cookies, under the watchful eye of a guard named Luca, and slowly Mia began to speak again. "Is Papa coming?" Mia asked as she colored in a sketchbook. "He's busy with work, sweetie," Sarah said, stroking the girl's hair. "But he loves you very much." "Beatrice said Papa hates me," Mia whispered, "because I look like Mommy." Sarah's heart broke. She knelt down. "Beatrice was a liar. Your papa looks at you like you are the sun and the moon. He sees your Mommy in you, and that makes him sad sometimes because he misses her, not because he's mad at you." Mia seemed to consider this. "Okay." That evening, the penthouse phone rang. It was Arthur. "Miss Jenkins, change of plans." "Is everything okay?" Sarah asked, gripping the receiver. "Mr. Moretti requires you at the gala tonight." "Me?" Sarah laughed nervously. "Arthur, I don't have a dress. I don't know how to act at a gala. I'm a governess." "The situation has changed," Arthur said, his voice tight. "We have received intelligence that the O'Connors might try to make a move on Mia. The penthouse is secure, but Mr. Moretti does not want to be separated from her. He wants Mia at the gala, in the private VIP suite, where he can see her. And since you are her guardian, you must attend." "Taking a child to a Mafia target zone, is he insane?" "He is a father who trusts no one but himself," Arthur said. "A stylist is on their way. Be ready in an hour." 1 hour later, Sarah Jenkins, the girl who bought her clothes at thrift stores, was staring at a stranger in the mirror. The stylist, a silent woman with quick hands, had put Sarah in a gown of midnight blue velvet. It was modest with long sleeves and a high neck, but the back plunged low, revealing the pale skin of her spine. It fit her like a second skin. Her hair, usually in a messy bun, was cascaded in soft waves over one shoulder. She looked powerful. "The car is waiting," the guard Luca said from the doorway. He paused, blinking. "Whoa, you look nice, Sarah." "Let's just get this over with," Sarah said, picking up her clutch. Inside, she had put a small canister of pepper spray. It seemed ridiculous against guns, but it made her feel better. They drove to the Pierre Hotel in a convoy of black SUVs. When they arrived, the paparazzi were swarming like locusts. Lorenzo was waiting at the side entrance to avoid the cameras with Mia. When Lorenzo saw Sarah step out of the car, he stopped mid-sentence. He was wearing a tuxedo that cost more than Sarah's childhood home. He looked devastatingly handsome, but his eyes were scanning the perimeter alert, dangerous. His gaze landed on Sarah and held. For 3 seconds the noise of the city faded. He looked her up and down, not with lust, but with a sudden realization of the woman beneath the uniform. "You clean up well, Miss Jenkins," he said, his voice rougher than usual. "I feel like an imposter," Sarah muttered, smoothing the velvet. "Good," Lorenzo said. "Imposters are harder to read. Keep your eyes open. Stay with Mia in the VIP box. If I give the signal, Arthur will show you. You take the service elevator to the basement. Do not wait for me." "What is the signal?" Lorenzo adjusted his tie. "If I button my jacket and touch my left ear, you run." They entered the ballroom. It was a sea of diamonds, champagne, and sharks in expensive suits. Sarah held Mia's hand tight. Mia was wearing a cute blue dress that matched Sarah's, looking like a miniature princess. They were ushered up to a private balcony box that overlooked the ballroom floor. It was enclosed in glass bulletproof, Sarah assumed. From up here they could see everything. Lorenzo remained downstairs, moving through the crowd. Sarah watched him. He was a shark swimming among goldfish. He shook hands, smiled tight, polite smiles, but his eyes never stopped moving. Suddenly, Sarah's grip on the balcony railing tightened. Entering the ballroom was a man who looked like a brawler stuffed into a tuxedo. He had red hair, a jagged scar running down his cheek, and a smile that looked like a snarl. "That's him," Sarah whispered to herself. Declan O'Connor. And on his arm was Beatrice. Sarah gasped. Beatrice looked radiant in a crimson dress, clinging to Declan's arm like a trophy. She was whispering in his ear, pointing right at Lorenzo. "She's with the enemy," Sarah breathed. Downstairs the room went quiet as Declan and Beatrice approached Lorenzo. The tension was so thick it was suffocating. Sarah pressed a button on the intercom system in the box so she could hear what was happening down there. "Lorenzo," Beatrice cooed, her voice amplified by the hidden mics. "You look tired." "Beatrice." Lorenzo nodded, ignoring Declan. "I see you found a new owner quickly. I hope he house-trained you better than I did." A gasp went through the crowd. Declan stepped forward, laughing. It was a loud, booming sound. "Moretti always the comedian. Beatrice here was just telling me how you threw her out in the rain. Very rude, Lorenzo. Very rude. I throw out trash, Declan. I don't recycle it," Lorenzo said, his hands relaxed at his sides, but Sarah saw the muscles in his neck bunching. "Careful," Declan said, his smile vanishing. "One man's trash is another man's treasure, and Beatrice has told me all about your little vulnerabilities." Declan's eyes shot up, straight up. He looked directly at the glass box. He saw Mia. He saw Sarah. He winked. Sarah's blood ran cold. "He knows we're here." "I suggest you leave, Declan," Lorenzo said softly, "before you embarrass yourself." "Oh, we're leaving," Declan said. "But the party is just getting started." He turned to walk away. As he did, Beatrice looked up at the box. She locked eyes with Sarah. She raised her hand and made a slashing motion across her throat. "Papa is in trouble," Mia whimpered. "No, he's not." Sarah lied, her heart hammering. "He's the strongest man here." Suddenly, the lights in the ballroom flickered. Pop, pop. It sounded like champagne corks, but Sarah knew better. She had grown up in a rough neighborhood. Those were silencers. Two of Lorenzo's guards dropped to the floor. Chaos erupted. Screams filled the air as the wealthy elite scrambled for the exits. Lorenzo didn't panic. He buttoned his jacket. He touched his left ear. The signal. "Mia, come on!" Sarah grabbed the child. "Luca, open the door." Luca, the guard assigned to the box, reached for the door handle, but then he stopped. He turned to face Sarah. He pulled a gun from his holster, but he wasn't aiming it at the door. He was aiming it at Sarah. "I'm sorry, Miss Jenkins," Luca said, his hand shaking slightly. "The O'Connors pay better." Sarah froze. They were trapped. The glass box was a cage. Downstairs, Lorenzo was fighting his way through a crowd of assassins, trying to get to the stairs, unaware that the danger was already inside the room with his daughter. "Luca, don't," Sarah said, stepping in front of Mia. "She's a child. You've been watching cartoons with her all day." "I have debts, Sarah. Big debts." Luca cocked the hammer. "Step aside. They just want the girl. They won't hurt her. Beatrice just wants leverage." "Over my dead body," Sarah snarled. "That can be arranged." Luca raised the gun. Sarah didn't think. She remembered the pepper spray in her clutch. It was in her right hand. As Luca adjusted his aim, Sarah threw the heavy crystal clutch bag at his face with all her strength. It hit him square in the nose. Luca flinched his gun, firing wild into the ceiling. Sarah lunged. She wasn't a soldier, but she was desperate. She sprayed the pepper spray directly into his eyes. Luca screamed, clawing at his face, dropping the gun. "Run, Mia!" Sarah shouted. She kicked the gun away, grabbed Mia's hand, and they burst out of the box into the service corridor. They ran down the hallway, the sounds of gunfire echoing from the ballroom below. "Where are we going?" Mia cried. "The roof," Sarah said. "The basement is too far. We go up." They reached the stairwell. Sarah could hear heavy footsteps thundering up the stairs below them. They were being hunted. They burst onto the roof. The wind was whipping around them, the lights of Manhattan sprawling out in every direction. "There!" Sarah pointed to the helipad. It was empty. There was nowhere to go. The door behind them banged open. It wasn't Luca. It was Declan O'Connor himself, flanked by 2 men. "Nowhere left to run, Cinderella." Declan grinned, his red hair blowing in the wind. "Hand over the girl, and I might let you live to clean my toilets." Sarah pushed Mia behind a ventilation unit. She stood up, smoothing her blue velvet dress. She had no weapon. She had no phone. But she had the rage of a woman who was done being invisible. "You want her," Sarah shouted over the wind. "You have to go through me." Declan laughed. "That will take about 2 seconds." He raised his gun. Suddenly, a shadow detached itself from the darkness of the water tower above them. A shot rang out, clean, precise. Declan's gun flew out of his hand, shattered by a bullet. He screamed, gripping his hand. Lorenzo Moretti dropped from the water tower ladder, landing between Sarah and the men like a darker god of war. He had a gun in each hand. His tuxedo was torn, and there was blood on his cheek, but he looked steady as a rock. "I told you, Declan," Lorenzo said, his voice cutting through the wind. "A Moretti never shows fear, and we never ever miss." The wind on the roof was deafening, whipping Sarah's hair across her face, blinding her for a moment. But the sound of gunfire was sharper. Lorenzo stood like a monolith, his dual pistols trained on Declan O'Connor. The Irish mob boss was clutching his bleeding hand, his face twisted in a rictus of pain and fury. His 2 bodyguards hesitated. They were hired guns, not suicidal zealots. They looked at Lorenzo the Storm, and then at their wounded boss. "Drop them," Lorenzo commanded. The wind didn't swallow his voice. It seemed to carry it. The guards dropped their weapons. "You're making a mistake, Moretti." Declan spat blood, dripping from his fingers onto the gravel roof. "The police are 3 minutes away. Beatrice called them. She framed you for the shooting downstairs. You're not the hero tonight. You're the terrorist." Lorenzo didn't flinch. "If I go to jail, I run it from the inside. If you die here, you're just dead." Sirens wailed from the street below, a cacophony of red and blue lights reflecting off the low clouds. Declan was right. The trap wasn't just physical. It was political. "Go!" Lorenzo barked at Declan's men. "Take your trash and leave. If I see you in New York again, there won't be a conversation." Declan glared at Lorenzo, his eyes promising retribution, before his men dragged him toward the fire escape on the far side of the roof. As soon as they disappeared, Lorenzo collapsed to one knee. "Lorenzo!" Sarah screamed, dropping to his side. She saw it now, a dark stain spreading on his thigh. He had been hit during the ascent. "I'm fine." He grunted, trying to stand but stumbling. "We need to move. The elevators are compromised. The stairs will be swarming with SWAT." "How do we get out?" Sarah asked, panic rising in her chest. She looked at Mia, who was shivering violently in her thin dress. Lorenzo looked at the edge of the roof. "We jump." "Excuse me." "Not to the street, to the annex." He pointed. The neighboring building, an old brick tenement, was about 8 feet away and slightly lower. It was a terrifying gap, but doable. "I can't make that jump with Mia," Sarah said, shaking her head. "I will take Mia," Lorenzo said, gritting his teeth against the pain in his leg. "You jump first. I throw her to you, then I follow." "You're shot. Adrenaline is a powerful drug, Sarah. Now go." We have 30 seconds before the door bursts open." Sarah looked at the gap. It looked like a mile. She looked at the police lights flashing below. She kicked off her high heels. She hiked up the velvet gown. She ran. She leapt into the void. For a second, she was weightless, suspended over the deadly drop. Then she hit the gravel of the adjacent roof, rolling hard, scraping her elbows. She scrambled up, heart pounding. "Ready!" she screamed. Lorenzo picked up Mia. "Hold tight, Tesoro, like a koala." He stepped back, took a breath, and launched himself. He landed, heavy, groaning, as his bad leg took the impact, but he kept Mia safe in his arms. He handed the child to Sarah. "Let's go," he wheezed. "Fire escape, alleyway. I have a car stashed 3 blocks over, a fallback car, not on the grid." They moved through the shadows of the city like ghosts. Lorenzo was limping badly, leaving a trail of blood that the rain quickly washed away. They found the car a nondescript, beat-up Honda Civic, parked in a derelict lot. It was the last thing anyone would expect a billionaire Mafia don to drive. Lorenzo tossed the keys to Sarah. "You drive. I can't feel my right foot." Sarah got behind the wheel. "Where are we going?" "The estate." "No," Lorenzo said, leaning his head back against the seat, his face pale. "The estate will be surrounded. The accounts will be frozen. Beatrice knows all the safe houses. She knows the codes." "Then where?" Lorenzo opened his eyes. They were hazy. "The Bronx, Arthur Avenue, number 412. It's where I was born. No one knows about it. Not even Beatrice." Sarah navigated the Honda through the rain-slicked streets, avoiding main avenues. Beside her, the most powerful man in New York was fading. In the back seat, Mia sang a quiet song to her invisible rabbit, traumatized into a strange calm. They arrived at the row house in the Bronx an hour later. It was narrow brick and smelled of roasted peppers and old damp wood. It was humble. Sarah helped Lorenzo inside. The furniture was covered in dust sheets. There was a crucifix on the wall, and old black and white photos of unsmiling Italian ancestors. "Kitchen," Lorenzo murmured. "First aid kit under the sink. Whiskey in the cabinet." Sarah became the doctor. She cut away his tuxedo pants, revealing the bullet wound. It had passed through the muscle of his outer thigh. Messy, but no arteries hit. "This is going to hurt," she said, holding a bottle of rubbing alcohol. "Do it." She poured the alcohol. Lorenzo didn't scream. He just gripped the edge of the table until the wood splintered. After she bandaged him and gave him painkillers, he passed out on the faded floral sofa. Sarah locked the doors, closed the blinds, and made a bed for Mia on the floor using cushions. She sat in the dark, watching the street through a crack in the curtains. She was a maid. She was supposed to be cleaning toilets. Now she was a fugitive guarding a Mafia don and his heir in a ghost house in the Bronx. She looked at Lorenzo's sleeping face. Without the armor of his suits and his glare, he looked younger, vulnerable. "I won't let them take you," she whispered into the darkness. 3 days in the Bronx safe house felt like a lifetime. The narrow row house on Arthur Avenue smelled of old wood and roasted peppers, a sharp contrast to the cold marble of the Hamptons. Here, amidst dust sheets and fading photos of Italian ancestors, Sarah tended to Lorenzo's wounds while he tried to salvage his crumbling empire from a burner phone. The situation was dire. On the small, fuzzy TV in the corner, Beatrice Sterling was everywhere. She played the weeping victim, perfectly sobbing to reporters that Lorenzo was an unstable monster who had attacked her and her new beau, Declan O'Connor. The narrative was set. Lorenzo was a fugitive maniac, and Beatrice was the grieving fiancée. "She's winning," Lorenzo growled, pacing the small kitchen with a limp. "The families are smelling blood. If I don't clear my name, they'll carve up my territory by the weekend." "Then stop playing her game," Sarah said, slamming a pot of pasta onto the table. "You're trying to fight a PR war with bullets. It won't work." Lorenzo stopped looking at her with genuine surprise. "What do you suggest I hand myself in?" "No, you offer her what she wants, or what she thinks she wants." Sarah outlined a plan that was as dangerous as it was brilliant. Beatrice was greedy, and her arrogance was her blind spot. "Call them. Tell them you surrender. Offer the shipping routes and the accounts in exchange for safe passage to Italy for you and Mia." "I would rather die," Lorenzo spat. "You won't die. You'll wear a wire." Sarah countered, her voice steady. "We get her to admit she framed you. We live stream it. We don't need a judge right now, Enzo. We need the truth." Lorenzo stared at her. The terrified maid was gone. In her place was a strategist. He nodded slowly. "Arthur has a contact at the Times. If we get the audio, he'll publish it instantly. They set the trap for midnight at Pier 17. Leaving Mia with Arthur, they drove to the docks in a battered Honda. The fog rolled off the East River thick and cold. Lorenzo checked his gun and the tiny microphone taped to his chest. "Stay in the car," he ordered. "Not a chance," Sarah replied, gripping her phone. "I'm the insurance." On the pier, Beatrice and Declan waited like vultures. Beatrice looked radiant in a white trench coat, gloating as Lorenzo limped toward her, holding a thick envelope. "I didn't think you had it in you to quit," Beatrice sneered, snatching the envelope. "I'm tired, Beatrice," Lorenzo said, his voice projecting clearly for the hidden mic. "You won. The gala, the shooting. Framing me was brilliant." "It was, wasn't it?" Beatrice laughed, the sound shrill in the night air. "Hiring Luca to betray you, having Declan's men shoot up the party. The public ate it up. They love a grieving woman." Lorenzo smiled, a dark, wolfish expression. "You're right. They do love a story. But they hate a liar." Beatrice opened the envelope. It was filled with blank paper. Confused, she looked up just as Sarah stepped from the Shadow's phone, raised high. "Smile, Beatrice," Sarah called out. "You're live." The gunshot shattered the night. Sarah braced for the impact, but it was Lorenzo who jerked back, slamming into her. He had taken the bullet for her, shielding her body with his own. "Enzo!" she screamed, pressing her hands against his bleeding shoulder. Beatrice stood over them, eyes wild, ready to fire the kill shot. "Goodbye, help," she sneered. But she never pulled the trigger. A blinding spotlight from a police helicopter cut through the fog, and sirens roared from every direction. Sarah's live stream hadn't just recorded the confession, it had broadcast it directly to the authorities. Declan O'Connor saw the writing on the wall. "It was her," he shouted, dropping his weapon and raising his hands. "She's the mastermind. I surrender." Beatrice screamed in rage as SWAT officers tackled her, dragging the woman in peril away in handcuffs. As medics rushed to load Lorenzo onto a stretcher, he grabbed Sarah's hand, smiling through the pain. "Worth it," he whispered. 6 months later, the gloom of the Moretti estate had been replaced by sunlight. Mia was no longer a silent ghost, but a happy child chasing a golden retriever through the gardens. Sarah sat on the terrace watching them until Lorenzo joined her. He walked with a cane, now a permanent reminder of that night, but his eyes were warm and free of shadows. "Beatrice got 20 years, he said, sitting beside her. "But I got a lifetime." He pulled a vintage ruby ring from his pocket, the stone dark as a pomegranate seed. "I don't need a maid, Sarah. I need a queen. I need the woman who saved my daughter and my soul. Will you marry me?" Tears pricked Sarah's eyes. She wasn't the invisible girl anymore. She was the heart of this family. "Yes, Enzo," she whispered. He slipped the ring on her finger and kissed her. The war was over. The storm had passed, and finally they were home. And that is the story of how a single phone call from a brave maid brought down an empire and built a new one. Sarah went from dusting statues to wearing the crown, proving that real power isn't about fear or money, it's about the courage to stand up for the innocent. Lorenzo Moretti learned that even the storm needs a safe harbor. Beatrice Sterling learned that you can't buy class, and you certainly can't buy loyalty. What did you think of Sarah's transformation? Would you have had the guts to jump off that roof? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this Mafia romance roller coaster, please smash that. Like button, share this video with a friend who loves a good drama, and subscribe to the channel. Turn on the notification bell so you never miss a story. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next one.